Good morning. My name is Amber Dawn Belmar, and I'm the Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation Initiative Program Coordinator. And I also happen to be the Special Events Coordinator, which means coordinating national services. So this Sunday, I find myself in a unique position to help shape a very complex experience. A worship service dedicated to honoring truth and reconciliation feels very strange to me. I will refer to the words of Tagaq Alfred, in Whose Land Is It Anyway? A Manual for Decolonization. He says, reconciliation, the invitation from Canada to share in the spoils of our nation's subjugation and dispossession. What a tainted gift and such a false promise. Reconciling with colonialism cannot heal the wounds the colonizers have wrought on our collective existence. The essential harm of colonization is that the living relationship between our people and our land has been severed. Our struggle is far from over. If anything, the need for vigilant consciousness as Indigenous peoples is stronger than ever. Reconciliation is recolonization because it is allowing the colonizer to hold on to his attitudes and mentality and does not challenge his behavior towards our people or the land. It is recolonization because it is telling Indigenous children that the problem of history is fixed. And yet they know through life experience that things have not changed and are getting worse. So they must conclude, I am the problem. If reconciliation is allowed to reign, our young people are going to bear the brunt of recolonization and carry a tension inside of them that is very difficult, if not impossible, to live with. Indeed, we are already seeing the sickening results of this psychological war on our young people in the shocking and recurring waves of self-harm and suicide that afflicts every one of our communities. How do we worship to this? What are we to uplift in ceremony today? Are we supposed to pat ourselves on the back for including land acknowledgements when we begin a formal meeting? This is all very uncomfortable stuff, and it should be. It's not over. It's unsettling. For those of you who are new to the conversation, uncolonizing is the work settlers and Indigenous peoples can do internally to detach from colonial ways of thinking, relating, and being on the land. Decolonizing is to return land, government control, community control, resources, processes, and sovereignty to Indigenous peoples. The inner work of settler uncolonizing, or what my partner Erin Horvath describes as all the stuff between the ears, which is what we've been doing as a national faith community mostly, gives space for the decolonizing efforts led by Indigenous peoples and should in no way be considered a salve to the actual day-to-day experience of Indigenous peoples. Uncolonizing is no less important. We need a radical transformation if we're to remain as welcome guests on this planet. And equally as important is to step back, way back, to live into Indigenous sovereignty. So how do we do all of that in worship, where usually we come together to be comforted and held in community? This has been a tricky one. We did our best. We're here today to pay respect, to show support, and get comfortable with our discomfort. It is a moment of honoring. Throughout the service, we will hear from various Unitarian Universalists about what it means to live into the discomfort of uncolonizing and to be unsettled by the truth of the ongoing suffering caused by colonialism. We will honor the truth by uplifting the poetic, musical, and artistic expression of contemporary Indigenous artists and acknowledge the complexity of moving forward. I want to acknowledge the profound emotions people are feeling on a day like today, when the death of the head of a monarchy is officially mourned with a federal holiday, while the Day of Reconciliation, Orange Shirt Day, these days are not. How can we value the life of one that much more than the deaths of so many? And yet, here we are, committed to unlearning and opening up, to staying present and loving, unsettled. This work, it takes time. The connections are made slowly in ourselves, with one another, and it's worth it. Today, we will acknowledge that we're doing what we said we would do at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2014, and there's a whole lot more for us to do in the future. We will close with a ritual of witnessing led by our Granny Sharon, followed by her words in prayer. And then at 3 p.m. Eastern, you are all invited to attend a free art therapy workshop facilitated by Reverend Karen Fraser-Gitlitz and Carrie Sinclair to discover how unsettling spirituality might take shape in your life. Stay with it. Keep showing up. Take the risks. Be unsettled. Be unafraid. I will light this chalice in honor of the victims and survivors of residential schools, our missing and murdered Indigenous women, our Indigenous friends, neighbors, and loved ones. Let's get started.
Easy enough, right? Okay. Now everybody all together say ha. 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 No, I can hear you a bit louder than that. Ha. 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 Now this time don't try to go too loud. Say ha with just your breath. No voice. Now don't do it too many times in a row because you will get lightheaded and we don't want that. Now take your left hand or your right hand, whatever is your free hand, put it over your throat and go and try to make it vibrate. So okay, now we're gonna put the sounds together, okay? So starting with E, 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 does anybody else want to come on the mic and try it? E, E, yeah, do you want to come join us? E, 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 keep going. Can you guys keep singing with her? Wait, keep going. So, we need your help, okay? So that she doesn't get thrown off, I need you to sing with her as loud as you can so that you can support her in trying this. Let's try it one more time, okay? Because now I'm going to do something a bit different. So just follow Reed and follow everybody else. Ready?
reason I'm starting recording is because we have nothing planned. And that is very much against the way it normally is in worship. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we just made a worship together in a way that might be uncomfortable because we haven't planned anything. And and as a part of the unsettling, and how we don't need to be afraid of it necessarily. So this was my idea. And I mean, just that quote that you brought up, Danielle, I think is really beautiful. And maybe we can, use that as well. I don't want to plan this whole thing out, but I just thought that maybe we could spontaneously have a conversation in a sacred way together. Sharon.
Can I make a suggestion here, since we're being spontaneous? And I would think, Danielle, that would be a lovely springboard to reread that quote. And
Yeah. Okay.
As our opening credo.
Sure. Okay, so these are from Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy, and it's just in the introduction of her book, and it says, Octavia Butler spoke of the fatal human flaw as a combination of hierarchy and intelligence. We are brilliant at survival, but brutal at it. We tend to slip out of togetherness the way we slip out of the womb, bloody and messy and surprised to be alone, and clever, able to learn with our whole bodies the way of this world. There's something about that imagery of like the surprised to be alone. Even though we have this capacity for community, we have this capacity for togetherness that is so powerful and so, yeah, just amazing. Like just coming out of a young adult retreat, having been together for 3.5 days with 17 other young adults, and the togetherness that we created while we were there, and our ability to slip out of that so easily as we leave the sacred space that we created together. But how do we hold that space? How do we create that togetherness even when we're not together physically? Was part of what I was trying to, that captured for me.
I think it harkens to, I'm just jumping in here. I think it harkens to, there's another story that's biblical that I think kind of says the same idea in a different way. And I know I've talked about it at some other services, but that's the story of Eve biting from the tree of knowledge and being cast out of Eden, finding ourselves bloody and alone. And that is what I think most religions center around, that you've got to be combined with spirit. And yet when we do everything scripted, we're so far away from spirit, and we're in our opinions instead of in our spirits. And so how do we avoid that, being in our heads and in our opinions and hitting the next mark and being perfectly choreographed so that nothing's ever out of place? That to me is the exact prescription of biting into the apple and staying in your head, and being cast out of Eden is here. It's inside of us. It's in our spirit, and spirit happens when we really connect deeply, and we can't connect deeply if we're hiding behind a script.
It's funny, I've already noticed in myself a sense of loss of control over how this is going, but in a really delightful way that I didn't even expect. And so I'm witnessing myself let go and be excited about what is coming out of this moment. It's the ceremony that we're creating already is helping me to unwind from my expectations.
Well, and another thing I would say, Amber, I think that's awesome, is that love. You know, when we're brutal, as you said in that quote, which is the truth, somehow when we're out of Eden, we're in our heads and it's critical. Like, it's so terrible. I'd like to say that I don't look at things and think, but I do. I have that little trickster energy, and I like that, because to me, how we describe things is how we respond to it. So a trickster energy is a lot more workable than the devil. That's so evil and dark, whereas it's trickster, you know, those are trickster voices. And I think we're so afraid of conflict and controversy, but then if it's done with respect and honoring, and differences are truly embraced, like we say so when we're coming together for ceremony, then it means being open to accepting the trickster part of, like, you acknowledged your fear there. And the trickster must be saying, oops, they're just going to go way off key and crash at the bottom of the hill. Like, it might happen, but in truth, we're together now.
Yeah, like what's this checklist I have in my head? Why do I have a checklist? What really are the things that need to be said right now? I'm going to really enjoy what's going to bubble up instead of worrying about the checklist. It's exciting.
It's exciting, and it feels like really important uncolonizing work to me. And when my friend Avery and I were doing like a new moon, full moon gathering for a while, it was really interesting, because we were working hard to be unscripted, but we're so trained to be scripted that we were like scripting being unscripted. And it's like, it's such a hard habit to break when it's like you're trained that that's what leadership looks like in colonized society. It's like being prepared and knowing what's supposed to happen at all times, and like having a plan B, C, D, E, and F in case things go a little too off in left field. And we loosened up a little bit more as we went, but it was just exactly like you said, Amber. Like, it's so interesting to observe those things coming up in ourselves as facilitators. And honestly, I feel like doing that specific facilitation group was just because our intention was to uncolonize our thinking and doing it, and our thinking around time, and to have intimate space with other members of our community. Because those were our intentions, like, the unconscious pieces became really evident to us as we went along with it. And yeah, it was a really beautiful learning experience. And I just love this space so much. I love learning to be unscripted and being courageous enough to speak up and not scared of saying the wrong thing. Like, it's so hard to not be scared of saying the wrong thing when there's not a script to follow.
You know, as the person who coordinates these national worship services, and a lot of the things that we do are pre-recorded, very planned. Some of it's very live and glitchy, and there's always a lot of heart that is poured into from the whole team. It's teams of people that make these moments for the national community to come together in making something worthwhile. And it's nerve-wracking sometimes, because there's a lot of expectation about what should happen there's a lot of protocol that we go through. And I'm very curious right now because this will be pre-recorded, and there are some congregations who are going to be watching a pre-recorded service. This is just one section of a larger piece, and I'm hoping people understand that a lot of it is pre-recorded. And I'm sure you can't assume that it's all super live, but I'm wondering what that connection feels like for others right now. And when we're all watching this together live on the 25th, which is today, what does this feel like to you? I'm curious, watching a live conversation that's been pre-recorded for you, for us, in a way that we've never done before. I know the last service that we did was never done before, and it, some people were very resistant to it. It had a really hard time finding meaning in it for themselves. And we heard about it, and then makes me nervous to do something different the next time. But I think it's very worth our while to continue to unravel the protocols that have kept us only being one way together, to make sure that there's room for the people who are really, really valued the something different.
Beneficiaries of a genocide. You who cannot call yourself settler. That's what I want you to call yourselves. You who speak to me, who speak about me in the third person, even though I've introduced myself and am sitting right here. Who say stupid things without knowing it. Like, but don't you sometimes wish you had a status card? And I don't see why they don't do better by themselves. After all, they get a free education. I don't care if you only came here 60 years ago, or how bad your ancestors had it in the place you came from, or you think the real problem is capitalism, or any other reason you don't identify with colonialism. You're still settlers, all of you. If your family came into the country under the authority of an asserted power calling itself the Government of Canada, you are, in the terminology of that self-same entity still in use today, a settler. It pains me to explain your government to you. I don't imagine you'll like this term any better, beneficiary of a genocide, but I think it narrows the argument. How much longer do we have to hear about your very real pain before you will have a conversation with us about ours? How much longer will you ask that your immediate needs take precedence over the fundamentals of our existence? What does it mean, this Aboriginal title? Does it mean they own the land? Are they going to come and take it back? Yes, and as a matter of fact. But put that aside. I will leave the future to explain itself to you. For now, let us stay in the present. Let us stay in this room where you are now uncomfortable and I am now unwelcome. Let us begin with what you call yourselves. It helps to breathe. Beneficiaries of a Genocide is an honest poem. It's important to me to be honest with you. What were these dialogues like for me? It was frequently an exercise in anger management. In that way, my experience was probably not so different from that of others in the room. I, too, went home from the dialogues tired. But it was not just taxing. It was also nourishing. Yes, there was the time a participant made a joke about Indigenous culture that I was not able to find funny. I was never given the opportunity to unpack that. But I was given the opportunity to draw a link between a medicine wheel teaching and a Christian practice that broke through a separation between myself and a participant who was a lifelong Anglican and enabled us to experience friendship. I think you can imagine how that would feel. You might also appreciate how satisfying it was for me when, after 4 sessions at UVic talking about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, I watched faces transform as a few participants were able to put together the implications of the Supreme Court's declaration of Aboriginal title for the Silcotin Nation with the stance of the Tsleil-Waututh with regards to the pipeline terminal in Burnaby. I'd like you to try to imagine the importance of that moment for me, what it might be like to see the Indigenous perspective on an issue of national importance filter through concerns about climate change and species extinction and take an accurate place in the conversation. I'd like you to imagine, too, what it was like for me to be offered tobacco, to have it placed on a table nearby, for me to have the option to pick it up, to be respected in this way, and to have been brought small gifts and things to eat, to have been treated with such ordinary thoughtfulness. So what was it like? It was complicated.
Hi, Carrie.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody. We are delighted to be here. So my name is Karen Fraser-Gitlitz. I'm a treaty relative and a guest here on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. I live in what's known as Saskatoon, Saskatchewan now. And I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I'm also a student in the Indigenized Art Therapy Diploma at the Wheat Institute in Winnipeg Holistic Expressive Art Therapy Institute.
So my name is Carrie Sinclair. I originally come from Pugatawagan, Manitoba. My parents are Linda Sinclair and Joseph Biggity. I am also a student at the Indigenized Art Therapy program through Wheat. And Karen and I have been doing workshops together, which I have enjoyed a lot.
Just making art can be inherently therapeutic, but in art therapy, somebody is making something. We use art in the most broad sense possible. So there's some form of making happening and something is made, and the artist, or the person making, and the thing that they've made, and the art therapist are all in dialogue together. And so there's a learning and a growing that happens that I just really, for me, it's very exciting. It brings together my interest in art and making and in spirituality, and also social justice. I was drawn to the program because I found myself in spaces, settler and Indigenous, and I was not able to be as present as I wanted to be, and I was not able to be in relationship the way I wanted to be in relationship. And so I was seeking a place and a time and a way of doing some learning around that. And so that's what drew me into the program in the first place.
the indigenized part is bringing in the teachings and all the things that I've learned throughout my career as a cultural teacher. So that really inspired me to do a lot of different things that I came up with on my own, as well as the things that we learned in classes. And one of the most important things that was important to me, or is important to me still, is that all our instructors are Indigenous women, mostly.
One of the things that I've appreciated about this way of working, the indigenized way of working, is that it's very gentle. I've certainly been in spaces where I've been appropriately called out, but then I kind of beat up on myself. And I spend more time, castigating myself afterwards in a way that's not really very helpful. And I found bringing these experiences to art therapy has allowed me to work through them in a different way, in a kinder way, in a gentler way. And that's one of the things that got me interested in making the offerings that we've made together, is to have a space that is safe enough to do the work. I mean, I don't think any space is perfectly safe, but that it is a space that is safe enough to start unpacking my identity and to help others unpack their identity. And I feel like Unitarian Universalists in this particular time are very interested in doing this work, and that this is one of the ways to do the work.
Well, I did notice that, well, I'm pretty sure the only Indigenous person in the groups that we've held so far. I think we've had a couple of Métis individuals, and I felt really comfortable being with the group because everybody was so eager to learn and were very respectful to the offerings that we had for them, because we had a mix of both the Indigenous way of knowing and the non-Indigenous way of knowing.
The idea of unsettling our spirituality or unsettling the settler is just to kind of loosen up the stories, because I think, I grew up at a time when the history of Canada was not told in a way that was honest and true to all the people and all the experiences. And so my kind of partway through my life, I started to unlearn some of the history of Canada, but I hadn't really unlearned my own family's history that I was taught as a child. And I hadn't unlearned the way of my way of connecting to the land. I think that we in our groups, we've sometimes done exercises around connection and disconnection with the land. And certainly connection with the land was a huge part of my childhood. But the words and the stories that I learned to help me understand what that connection, what that felt sense of connection was about, were colonialized stories. Very individualized, very much like the use of the word exploring. It was I didn't realize how politicized the stories were that I was being told, that I kind of gravitated towards to help me understand my relationship with the land. So part of what I wanted to do with this workshop is give people the experience of hearing some of Carrie's teachings, and just to sit with that and say, well, how does that teaching fit with who I am? And what is that, how do I really let that land on me, on my sense of self, on my kind of feeling, my emotional body, my spiritual body, and then kind of start to write about that experience, or start to draw about that experience or art about that experience, and then to find a new way of being in relationship with myself as I'm in relationship with the land. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes lots of sense. So the one thing that that I wanted to bring up, we were just having a little discussion about this too, about the guilt that people, the guilt that settlers have about what had happened to our people. And I always tell individuals that, well, it's not your fault, but also finding a way to a different way to speak to them about it. Yes, it's not your fault, but also honoring the way they're feeling and just trying to think about it differently since we had the discussion. And Karen, do you want to talk a little bit about the guilt?
Yeah, I know for myself, the energy of guilt and sometimes shame even, it freezes me. And I feel like that's some of what was happening when I was in spaces where I wasn't able to be as fully present as I wanted to be. I was getting stuck in myself. Like when I think about the energy of guilt, it turns me inward and out of relationship with the people that I'm trying to be in relationship with. So I think the art is it can be so gentle, you know, as just a way of expressing that. And then I'm looking at the artwork, there's one by my desk, that I did, and seeing what's going on in there, it gives me some distance from it. I can be in conversation with it. And then, you know, guilt is an energy, and being in dialogue with it opens it up and allows the energy to move in different ways. And then I'm not stuck quite so much.
So the other thing that I'd like to mention about the art therapy itself too is a lot of people think that they need to be artists to do art therapy. You don't have to be an artist to be able to create stuff that you're expressing about what you feel or what you're going through. It's a way to express and get out those things that we no longer want to hold on to, and in a fun, creative way.
Yeah. So the theme of this morning is unsettled and unafraid. And I'm curious what you would have to say about the unafraid part and about the fear.
So the unafraid part brings me back to 7 sacred teachings. So the opposite of being unafraid, or being unafraid, I mean, sorry, not the opposite of, is that teaching of the bear, having that strength and that courage to do the things that you're scared to do, and having that courage to go beyond yourself and picking yourself out of your fear and trying to do different things, new things, and also having the courage and the strength to be able to step back and not, you know, push your way into situations where you don't need to be in. So there's the two different things there for it.
Thank you. That seems like a good place for us to wrap up our portion of this morning with that teaching. Thank you, Carrie. It's been such a privilege to work with you, and also all the people we've had a chance to work with in the groups who have had that courage to try something new.
This poem is called Connections Are Made Slowly by Marge Piercy. Connections are made slowly, sometimes they grow underground. You cannot tell always by looking what is happening. More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden. Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar. Weave real connections. Create real nodes. Build real houses. Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving. Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in. A thicket and bramble, wilderness to the outside, but to us interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs. Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen. Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in. This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always. For every gardener knows that after digging, after the planting, and after the long season of tending and growth.
Well, you know what comes to mind with me? I'm just looking at the screen and just taking it out of our heads a little bit. You know what I'm seeing is fire and water. We have, look at, Ilara's even come with the fiery red headset, and you both appear to have orange in your background. And then you see the cool flow of water with Amber and myself, which it just totally was spontaneous and it happened. But it's those elements that compose most of our rituals in the world are around fire and water. And I think what's so awesome is if in sharing what we're speaking of now gets noted in our spirits by offering a ritual to everything that everybody's contributed to here. We're all in this together. And I think in the hierarchical model, there's a leader and the followers. And I think as we're decolonizing, coming together in an organic way, I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of pieces, but what I notice in my community is all of our ceremonies have an organic aspect to it, in that everybody comes together, sometimes not even always in harmony, and harmony's found, and then the ritual validates. It's almost like signing the document or something like that. But something organic has to happen for the ritual to be complete.
If we can give ourselves permission for that, right? Like, not only do you not need to be perfect, like you don't even have to be close to perfect. You can be at the 50-yard line, right? And presence is what's necessary. Presence, being here, being together with everyone, as I imagine video cameras across the country, being with one another and being present to one another. That's how we live into the unsettling, right? That's where we're trying to get to, is to just, I don't know, not find comfort in the unsettling, but to like manage it, to be able to like be present with the discomfort.
One of the things that really came up for me as you were just speaking, Danielle, is like how, I don't know, there's something really precious about being invited in just as yourself and not as a script. Like, yeah, I feel more honored and like respected to be in this space with the three of you in this context than if Amber had sent something out for us all to read in this time together. Like, there's a real, I feel really grateful to have been invited in, and I always feel grateful to have been invited into leadership roles within our community, but there's a different depth to the gratitude of just being asked to show up as I am in all of the chaos and messiness of life, like you were talking about with our Octavia Butler quote. There's a different level of gratitude to wanting to being felt welcomed in that way rather than in the way of something that came out of a box.
Thank you, Ilar. What I was just going to share was in my first unsettling, because remember, I'm a 60s scooper and was raised in Burnaby by a very organized, run by the clock family. And when I met my granny, she kept wanting to give me medicines and tell me to go out and make a ceremony. And I'd be like, but I'd think of all the ways I could trick her into telling me what to do. Like, so Granny, I've got the sweetgrass, and if you were me, what would you do? And she would go stoic and silent in that she would be in her power in a way that I'd not encountered. I'd been around codependent people all my life, and they'd be like, what, her trying to take care of me. She didn't do that. She wasn't codependent. She had this sense of herself. And so she wasn't aggressive with me or tuning me out or rejecting me, but she just held the space. And pretty soon I would go out into the bush and something would come alive in me. I would start to listen to the birds singing and realize, oh, they're calling me over here. I'll just go over here. And then, oh my goodness, look, there's berry bushes right there. And just get deeper and deeper down this experience that was bringing alive my spirit. Because if she told me what to do, that's where I would have arrived. Oh, okay, let me put my sweetgrass down here, and then I light it up and smudge myself and sing this specific song. She wouldn't do that. And that was so terrifying for me. And I do remember too, coming home after being away all afternoon, and just my granny would just look at me and say, you saw something, didn't you? And I look and I go, mm-hmm. And no words would need to be said. I knew she knew, and that I got it. But it wasn't even neat for me then, even though I had that experience, I still somehow ran on insecurity, codependence. It took me a lot of years to just learn how to breathe and be in the moment, but our spirits are alive in the moment. If we're in our heads, there's separation in it. So, my granny kind of pushed me out of the nest. She took care of me and did everything for a long time. She was showing me what to do. She didn't ever tell me what to do. And then when it came my turn, I was terrified. I wanted to be taken care of. And she, in a very stoic, in her power sort of way, pushed me out of the nest. And it was what needed to happen next.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Danielle Weber. I use she and they pronouns, and I live on the traditional territory and the reservation territory of the West Bank First Nations people in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. I no longer want to write sermons. I didn't really ever want to write sermons. I remember having a conversation with my minister, Reverend Deborah Falk, while I was in seminary, saying I didn't want to write an essay every week. And don't get me wrong, I know that there is so much more to Sunday morning worship services than just the sermon. Rituals to honor our joys and sorrows, singing together, learning wisdom through the eyes of children, pledging our financial resources and commitment to the community, witnessing the sacred within one another. These are all parts of the average Sunday service in any of the congregations that I've preached for. But I did, and I still do, write Sunday sermons, because that is what most Unitarian Universalist communities want to pay for. This is what we have put the bulk of our financial resources towards. I know ministers offer more to congregations than just sermons and worship services. Having worked as a parish minister for 8 years, I know it is a grueling job of administrative work, pastoral care, staff supervising, strategic planning, committee meetings, and worship services. However, by and large, when a community is hiring a minister, especially if it's a small community with a small budget, they are going to want worship services. Or when we think about ministers being hired to support small lay-led congregations, it is more often than not to share a Sunday service. When I was in seminary, I was told to expect to spend 1 hour of work time for every 1 minute of spoken sermon. So if I was preaching a 20-minute sermon, I was spending 20 hours preparing the service between research and writing, coordinating with musicians and worship associates, and then the actual service on Sunday mornings. This meant that half of my work week, when I was lucky enough to work full-time, was spent crafting a service that would be consumed on Sunday morning. If I was lucky, usually before brunch, and maybe after soccer practice, or in the midst of the errands being run before the beginning of a busy work week. What wasn't discussed in seminary was how little those services might affect the individuals in the pew. And I don't mean that these services are not affective, but how often has a service, even the best of Sunday services, like the ones done in the beginning of the church year or right before an annual general meeting, shifted the way we perceive the world and how we interact with it? Sermons can certainly create emotional shifts within people, and I know that storytelling is an important way for people to share wisdom and pass on knowledge. We witness this every time a group gathers to listen to stories from Elders Sharon and Stephen. Some of the most memorable bits from sermons are the stories told, the personal moments where the congregation is invited into the vulnerable moments of the speaker. Perhaps this is why we often tell the same stories over and over again, so that we can spend time with them, allow the knowledge to wash over us and settle in and shift our minds and ways of being. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot tell always by looking what is happening. Unconsciously, as we listen to one another's stories, as we begin to let trust grow, as we feel comfortable sharing our own stories. Connections are made slowly in little moments of sharing, little moments of trust, little moments woven together until suddenly the connections represent one squash plant taking over your entire garden. I believe these little moments of connection, these little moments of dialogue within our sacred communities are what shift our lives, creating the moments that allow us to shift the way we interact with the world around us. Communication, sacred community, covenanted community, in conversation with one another. I think that we do this best through small circle conversations. A group of no more than 8 or 10 people discussing topics that are meaningful and enriching. When we have the capacity to study, practice, communicate, and struggle with a topic with others. This is when I witness shifting within others and within myself. The tangle of bramble, the interweaving of wilderness deep inside us as we stretch to connect more. If I could write my own job description, I would spend 20 hours a week collating, preparing, practicing, and hosting Chalice Circle or covenant groups. I believe that the effects of my ministry would be dramatically increased if Unitarian Universalist communities spent more time in dialogue, focused and intentionally communicating. We could create incredible communities with increased opportunities to shift, learn, and grow. When I decided that I wanted to be a Unitarian Universalist minister, it was because I believed that our faith and our principles have the ability to heal the world and have the ability to liberate each and every one of us from the bonds that hold us restricted in our world. Capitalism, colonialism, heteropatriarchy, cisnormativity and monogamy, power and privilege. These are all the bonds that we are attempting to be liberated from. And I believe that preaching on a Sunday morning, spending half of my work hours for the 90 minutes that we are together on Sunday mornings, is not actually the most useful thing that I can do to help us get free from these bonds. I want to spend time helping people figure out how to change their lives and thereby change the world, to liberate themselves, and in doing so, liberate others. And I don't know if I can do that by preaching every week, but I can do it by being in dialogue, by having uncomfortable conversations, by sitting with people as they struggle through the bonds that hold them stuck. Sometimes that is within small groups. Sometimes that is one-on-one. And sometimes that is by helping at the national office, by creating opportunities where people can learn to shift and taking that information back to their communities. To me, this is what unsettling means. Shifting our situations where we are uncomfortable to learn from others, to witness with our full awareness the privilege that we have and the dynamics that power brings into our relationships, to commit ourselves to the discomfort that comes with change, to get stuck in the interwoven thickets, and to get pierced by the bramble, and then to witness our pain, to find meaning in it, to ritualize it, to find ways to create containers where we can become unafraid of the unsettling. I think back to the inclusivity forums that Amber and Aaron hosted for us over the last several months, and I am reminded of the container that they created, the grounding that happened at the beginning, the storytelling that was woven in and out of all the interactions, and then the moments when we were asked to struggle with our discomfort, to hold up the mirror and witness our behavior, to inquire where that behavior is coming from, to resist the urges that come up with ourselves that will ease our discomfort. Amber and Aaron and Sharon and Stephen and all the other individuals who shared of themselves for those forums created spaces that allowed me to become unafraid. If we are going to uncolonize our organizations, our institutions, we are going to have to unsettle ourselves. We are going to have to get uncomfortable. We're going to have to create moments where our dreams and our longings for the future are drastically different from how we engage in the world now. One of my imaginings is a faith community where I do not have to spend half of my paid hours working to create a sermon that might not help us break free of the bonds that hold us back. Karen and Carrie have created art practices that help to unsettle our spirituality. Elder Sharon keeps coming back to tell us stories, to share with us the wisdom that she has gained through the life that she has traveled. What are you preparing to upset and unsettle within your lives and your institutions to create this liberation? How are you planning to become unafraid? What containers can be created to help you do this work? And who might help you and us create create those containers? I leave you with these questions because I believe that through answering the questions, we will be able to make a world where we are all liberated.
I'm just so grateful to be alive. And one of the things Amber and I were talking about is seeing the risks, seeing the attempt. When I was little, my first encounters with the institutions were very had very negative outcomes. For example, the apprehension from my family by social workers. The psychiatrist who saw me because I was so traumatized said that I held my breath until I passed out as a baby, said that I was just wanting attention and to ignore me, to having my grade 1 teacher campaign against me staying in the class to be mentally, because she said that I was mentally retarded, onward to having a baby and being screened to see if I was an appropriate parent. It's just not being good. And this is the real work we need to do together. And so if something's awkward, if something's uptight, what are we hanging on to? Because if it's working for us, we'd have more harmony in our world, in our institutions. Everything is kind of fragmented. We see more and more separateness in the world. And it takes us just being human to know that I hurt, that I have reasons why I get reactive, and hopefully you'll love me up and hold me when I am reactive, because I am a product of trauma. But I would suggest everybody is. We've all been shut down. We've all been marginalized in some way or another. There is such a thing as privilege, which is true. But even in my family who raised me, who were tremendously privileged, their important values were in being perfect, and nobody is. And then everybody struggled with shame from being imperfect. But isn't it so wonderful that we're taking steps towards being ourselves? There's wholeness in it. So to me, power means being whole, being not afraid for you to know that I have my challenges and struggles. And I know I have confidence in this circle, in this moment, that I'm loved irregardless. And so I think that that's what we want in our worship circles, is acceptance. And somehow when we struggle too hard and are scripted, we actually are creating separation unintentionally. There might be good information in it all and wonderful experiences, but there's a separation, not that actual bonding and coming together that we're all hungry for in this colonial world.
And I feel like we're hungry for it internally too. I feel like that's one of the biggest lessons for me with the uncolonizing work that I've been doing, is really just recognizing that there's voices in my head that are privileged and there's voices in my head that are marginalized, and they need to come together. And like, reconciliation is reconciling externally, but it's reconciling internally too. It's like really acknowledging the harms that your inner child experienced and loving those parts, and recognizing the super loud critical voices in yourself and loving those parts. And just like I love the covenant from the inclusivity forums, because that idea of that being able to look like the reflexivity aspect of being able to sit with that discomfort and really like honestly and genuinely ask yourself, like, where is this discomfort coming from? And like, why is it there, and how can I heal it? And it's just like these moments of being together with each other are how we can heal it in a deeper way, right?
This poem is called Reconciliation by Rebecca Tababundan. We are waking up to our history from a forced slumber. We are breathing it into our lungs, so it will be part of us again. It will make us angry at first because we will see how much you stole from us, and for how long you watched us suffer. And we will see how you see us, and how when we copied your ways, we killed our own. We will cry and cry and cry, because we can never be the same again. But we will go home to cry, and we will see ourselves in this huge mess, and we will gently whisper the circle back, and it will be old and it will be new. Then we will breathe our history back to you. You will feel how strong and alive it is, and you will feel yourself become a part of it. And it will shock you at first because it is too big to see all at once, and you won't want to believe it. You will see how you see us, and all the disaster in your ways, how much we lost, and you will cry and cry and cry, because we can never be the same again. But we will cry with you, and we will see ourselves in this huge mess, and we will gently whisper the circle back, and it will be old and it will be new.
I wonder if there's something that we could do as an invitation to those who are with us right now, as a way to tap into those discomforts or comforts or revelations or whatever's happening inside, so that we can all be together in this moment, this virtual moment, and be okay with whatever's coming up as a spiritual coming together.
How about if we just witness some of the wisdom and things that we've resonates with us, and be intimate with each other? I think that would be an honoring ceremony to close what we've heard.
And maybe invite people to think about that for themselves.
Exactly.
Write it in the chat, maybe. If you want to be actively engaged, type it in the chat, something that resonated.
Or even a person's essence. So I'm going to start the witnessing the way my people do things. And it's not even just quoting what's been said, but what I want to witness is your pure-heartedness. I see your struggles, and I see how all of you each are change makers, that you're allowing yourselves to take risks. So you're brave. I see bravery. I feel courage. I feel competency, and it's an honor to be here and to sit and to know you're here because you care, because you love yourself, you love your families and your community. And that's something, we use the word powerful. That's very powerful to me.
I just want to raise up what Elara said about the reconciliation within, because that's not a concept that I've heard, but it's definitely something that I've struggled with myself, is that internal battle between the person that I am and the person that I know I can be, or the person that shows up in these precious moments, that can hold space for other people and that can witness one another, like others, individuals in pastoral moments. Yeah, the person that I am in any day-to-day action versus the person that I want to be. And knowing that the struggle of reconciliation and the struggle of being unsettled is not just with my body and out there, but it's within my own body. And the way that you said that gave me shivers. It's just that recognition of being able to recognize that the unsettled parts can be within us, and that we have the power to witness and hold true to those too, and struggle with them. And that's part of the challenge. And yeah, I don't know, part of the challenge, but also a big part of the possibility of our journey forward. Thank you. Thanks so much for raising that up.
I really feel blessed by the connection that we share, and by this strange and wonderful container of you that has brought us together, and everyone who's going to be here together. It's a beautiful and strange container, and I feel like there's so much beautiful possibility for growth and learning and wisdom, and there's definitely pieces that we need to unlearn and unsettle, but there's still also just so much beautiful possibility, and I really, really, really deeply appreciate and value that. I think that's where what I want to uplift.
Gitche Manitou, creator of all life, we give thanks for the holy gift of these medicines that were shared today. We give thanks for truth. We give thanks for honesty. We give thanks for bravery and commitment. We give thanks to the unfolding, ever-changing universe, and for all the opportunities we have to create love, to create transformation, to build connections, to find the harmonies. And we ask that everybody in this sacred circle be guided, be led on the journey home. All my relations.